Attention, soldiers, you are now entering the war zone. Please keep close to your compatriots and have your weapons at the ready. If you would like to skip the introduction, please fast forward to about 7.5 minutes. And now, poets at war.
Once, there were 4 children, whose names were Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy.
Suppose I'm writing a novel. I write, Mary laid down her book. Next moment came a knock at the door. For Mary, who's got to live in the imaginary time of the story, there's no interval between putting down the book and hearing the knock. But I, her creator, between writing the first part of that sentence and the second, may have gone out for an hour's walk and spent the whole hour thinking about Mary.
We make things by the law in which we are made. We create because we are created.
In a hole in the ground, there lived a hobbit.
One ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, in the darkness bind them.
Tolkien and Lewis, both in their way, lifted me out of this world to show me a thundering beauty. And when I read the last sentence and came tumbling back to earth, I could still hear the peal. I hear it to this day. God allowed those stories to lift the veil on the imaginary world to show me the real world behind it, which ended up being, in the end, the one I was already in. The real world, at least in part, isn't out there somewhere, nor is it in my mind. It's here, right under my feet, all around me. Tolkien and Lewis held the fabric of Narnia or Middle-earth in one hand and clutched our world in the other, building a bridge across which we could set out for perilous realms, and yet return safely with some of the beauty we found there.
My first and last philosophy, that which I believe in with unbroken certainty, I learnt in the nursery. I generally learnt it from a nurse, that is, from the solemn and star-appointed priestess at once of democracy and tradition. The things I believed most then, the things I believe most now, are the things called fairy tales.
We live in a moment that's unlike any other moment, a moment of bizarre tyranny, a moment of overreach.
I was nearly torn apart by a crazy doctor.
A moment of fear. It's like, and how are we living? How are we standing up in this moment?
I was made asleep by a bunch of mangy pirates.
Are we full of joy? Like, are we characters who are full of joy and unafraid?
And eaten. Got that? Eaten by a fire-breathing dragon. And not to mention being tossed, squashed, and scared practically to death.
It's like, how do we image God in this particular narrative in which we've been placed, in this chapter? And we get trained for that by reading about Sam and Frodo and Aragorn and Gandalf, and reading, Charlotte's Web and Animal Farm, and reading about Prince Caspian. Like, when you're little, you read those things and you read stories when you're older, and it reinforces what is the courageous action of a character in this moment.
Yet you stand before me.
Well, yeah.
Think, boy. What kind of an adventure would you have had if I brought you here with a turn of the page?
I wept bitterly, and then I said to myself, when everything happens quite miserably, then He sends help. I have always read so. People must first of all suffer a great deal before they can bring anything to accomplishment.
God, who at various times and in various ways spoke in time past to the fathers by the prophets, has in these last days spoken to us by His Son, whom He has appointed heir of all things, through whom also He made the worlds.
For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. For the earnest expectation of the creation eagerly waits for the revealing of the sons of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of Him who subjected it in hope, because the creation itself also will be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation groans and labors with birth pangs together until now. Not only that, but we also who have the first fruits of the Spirit, even we ourselves, groan within ourselves, eagerly waiting for the adoption, the redemption of our body.
minstrel boy to the war is gone. In the ranks of death you'll find him. His father's sword he hath girded on, and his wild harp slung behind him. God of song, said the warrior bard, though all the world betray thee, one sword at least thy right shall guard, one faithful harp shall praise thee. The minstrel fell, but the foeman's chain could not bring that proud soul under. The harp he loved ne'er spoke again, for he tore its cords asunder, and said, no chain shall sully thee, thou soul of love and bravery. Thy songs were made for the pure and free, they shall never sound in slavery. The chains upon the people came, and they gave away their freedom. No prophets left, they then grew lame, they accepted their false kingdom. But one young man saw the minstrel boy, and he took up the shredded strings, and with great love remade with joy the sacred tool for truth to sing.
So yeah, you know the drill, TK. We usually speak about an hour-ish. You've been on before, and just see how it goes. I'm recording this whole time. I was recording 20 minutes ago, and I just cut it where I need to cut it. And we're talking feminism and Disney's Renaissance, particularly in the Renaissance, but obviously we can give context either direction, and that sort of a thing. I just thought it would be a good, interesting topic to go through with you, and see what we thought and stuff. So I know you prefer, well, maybe you don't prefer, but I know you're more comfortable when I've kind of give a little bit of an introduction or start things up, so that's why I'm doing it. So yeah, that's where we're at. Alex, for the guests listening, couldn't be here tonight. He had a prior engagement that suddenly showed up. I don't know what the details are, but that's fine. And we were trying to get her in here for like, what, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, something like that. And now we finally got her in here. So that's good. TK Wilson, everybody, author of, why am I blanking on the title? Book of the White Raven. Lost Chronicles of the Hidden People, right?
Correct.
I got it. Yes. That's so good. I'm going to read it for you eventually, I think. So I'll get you an audiobook somewhere you can publish. But yeah, so good to have you on. You have missed a couple.
Like this.
Yes, it does. People need to go get it. We'll try and remember to link it. If not, you people have thumbs and fingers. You can look it up yourself. So yeah, you missed a couple of the last Disney ones that the three of us had done, and so I wanted to have you on to talk some Disney stuff. And we opted to go ahead and broach this topic of feminism in Disney's Renaissance, which I find really interesting because it's not something that is, I would argue it's somehow not subtle and not over the top either. It's in a kind of a weird in between when you look at Disney's overall feministic tendencies through the years. But yeah, so I don't know exactly where you want to pick up, but why don't you just pick somewhere in the timeline and we'll just start talking through it. Unless you want to go somewhere completely
let's start
different.
at the very beginning.
Okay, very beginning.
It's a very good place to start.
Pardon me, Brendan, what'd you say?
It's a very good place to start. Sorry, that's a musical reference. Excuse me.
Yes, well, we'll start at the beginning of Disney Renaissance with Little Mermaid, and perhaps even going with the TVs. Admittedly, I don't remember this very well at all.
You remember better than me. I didn't watch it
was
growing up.
Yeah, the television show Gummy Bears, which was the first Disney Renaissance TV cartoon.
Yep. Does Brendan not
Really?
remember Gummy Bears at all?
I've never heard of this. I thought gummy bears were something you eat.
Look it up, sir. Gummy Bears dancing here and there and everywhere. I know the song.
Yes, it was written by somebody pretty famous. I was like, what? But yeah, if you look it up, I've got the DVD case set, but I did not bring it over here, and I'm not on video anyway, so I don't know why I brought my props.
It's sort of like
Adventures of
Disney.
the Gummy Bears.
Yeah.
Yep.
Brendan.
I watched it when I was a real little kid.
I am very flabbergasted. This looks like proto Disney Robin Hood.
Even though it's definitely after.
Okay, fine. Fine. It looks like. Oh, I guess. Okay, it shows you how well I know my Disney. Anyway, now that we've sidetracked off of Gummy.
TK?
TK, no.
So.
Anyway, go ahead.
Okay.
That was weird. All of a sudden, something started speaking to me. What we have with The Little Mermaid is the first truly feminist Disney princess. I think we can all agree on that.
Yes,
or
I would say so.
At least more feminist than you'd think. I mean, really, if we want to talk about feminism per se, we'd have to start with Miss Bianca.
Sure. From the Rescuers?
Because she is the first one of the Rescuers. Yes, because she's the first one to really take charge of an assignment.
Okay. Continue.
And seek it out for herself. Rather than wait for something to come to her, she comes to the man's world. They actually say that in the movie. And seeks out her own adventure. But Ariel is the first one people think of when you say feminist Disney.
Right.
So I don't think... Now, in Anderson's fairy tale, obviously this was before all of that came about. She is not what you'd call... The original Little Mermaid is not what you'd call a feminist icon.
No.
No. But the first thing you notice about Ariel, and this is actually, I think, pretty positive, is that she is curious about the world and she wants to learn. It's not about, someday my prince will come, but people mistake that all the time. But it's about the experience of learning something.
Sorry about that. I was helping Hazel with something real quick, but yeah.
No problem.
With that, obviously there's live action stuff even before that with the suffragette stuff in Mary Poppins is a big example. That was one of the biggest things that P.L. Travers really was upset about.
I am not shocked.
That's one of the few things that I think she definitely had a reason to whine about. She also was upset that the color red was used in the movie.
Okay. Well, that might be a superstition thing.
Right, yeah, totally. But anyway, continue with what you're doing. I was just bringing up. I think that's probably the earliest overt reference. And anything
Yes.
Disney is probably the suffragettes in Edwardian England in the Mary Poppins movie. But I think they said the main reason they put that in there is they wanted her to be doing something and not just be a neglectful mother.
Well, that makes sense.
So yeah, continue with where you were going.
So I can buy that. Because let me see. Little Mermaid was 89.
Mm-hmm.
So women were starting to go to college more, and I think that Ariel's curiosity and desire to learn should be celebrated about her. But
yeah, that's one of the things that the 90s really conflated with feminism and the ideas of feminism. And feminism had long been moving away from this idea that an educated woman was somehow more feminist and less traditional, which is just, that's one of the weirdest things. I hear people talk about Belle in particular, we're getting to her, but as like this Disney feminist icon, and I sit here and kind of laugh because she's actually in many ways just independent. She's an anti-feminist in a lot of ways, because feminists are mostly about becoming productive members of society through the machine. They won't necessarily say that, but they say that's the way you become something, the way you make something of yourself. Go to college, get a degree, get into whatever kind of field. And Belle is the opposite of that in a lot of ways.
That's true. Because, yes, she is educated, but she wants more than this provincial life. But she, settles down and gets married and presumably has children, because that's what you did when you marry into the aristocracy like that.
Right.
Well, I think now we run into a problem of what does feminism mean?
Good place to drop some definitions. Yeah, go ahead.
Because I think that feminism back in the day probably meant something very different than feminism now, and you have to kind of track what happens from that.
Absolutely.
And so this is something that I don't really know much about because, well, frankly, it hasn't been important to me. But also, it's just sort of, I know more about the cause and effect nature 40 years down the road. I know more about the results of the movements, but I don't know what the movement was saying it was doing and what it was trying to do, because those two could be different things.
Yes.
So is that something that
take? Well, I was gonna say, TK, why don't you take maybe pick a movement, and we have mostly first, second, and third wave is kind of what we're dealing with. We're sort of got a weak fourth wave going on, but that's being kind of destroyed by LGBTQ other stuff.
Yes.
And so do you want to just maybe start with phase one, and we can talk about that, because I think that one's the most nuanced, and then we can get to second and third wave. Yeah, very briefly.
Okay, so first wave feminism was basically the suffrage and abolition movement combined. Because the feminists of that day argued that if women can't have a voice in government, how are they supposed to train good sons and teach them how to be productive members of society if they can't speak for themselves?
Right.
And the abolition movement came in because, and also to a lesser degree, the temperance movement, because women saw the injustice of the black slave trade, and to a lesser extent, the indentured slave trade, as twin issues.
Right.
If these people aren't free, then the system is inherently unjust.
Careful.
Therefore, we need to correct this system and give the people rights to be full citizens of, well, let's say the United States.
Right.
Since we all live here and we're all familiar with U.S. history. Now, to them, that meant voting rights, the right to own their own money, and the right to own their own property. That was it.
Right.
That was first wave feminism. That was
now, like you said,
that was
the
all
temperance
the first wave
movement.
feminists wanted.
The temperance movement did come in with that, and that's something we do have to mention very briefly. The temperance movement, if I'm thinking it's the wrong thing, forgive me, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. The connection with men being drunken and abusive and thus creating prohibition later on. And so basically there was I think the main reason for this kind of feminism to jump up in the first place is because men were not doing what they should be doing. Different states did allow women to own property, for instance, and vote if they were heads of household, because everything was heads of household voting in most of the states. But there were some states that it was only men. You had to be a man, and you had to be a man, and that's messed up. So there were times and places where this was correct, and that's where first wave gets really nuanced, and you really do have to like sift through it. There were a lot of angry women who really couldn't divorce at the time in any way, shape, or form. Rightly so in many cases, but also I think just women who were very unhappy with their lives, and the way that they lashed out was trying to build and be constructive. But the problem ultimately comes down to an egalitarian viewpoint with that seeks to level everything. Instead of asking where is the authority for a woman to have and own property, which is a good question that nobody asks anymore. They seek to connect it to the image of God. That's what they tried to do, and successfully so. But they didn't say like, well, what does God want for women and what does God want for men, and are there differences? They wanted to just completely throw out those nuanced questions. And not all of them, some of them were a little different. You know, this was the very baby movements of this whole thing. Second wave is where things start to get really wacky. Do you want to just jump through really quickly second and third?
Second wave feminism is basically the free love movement.
Yep.
That came about in like the 50s to the 60s and into the 70s, but by the mid 70s into the 80s, that became third wave feminism, which was more about being a productive member of society.
Hazel wants to say goodnight. Say goodnight real quick.
Good night.
Good night, Hazel.
They say goodnight. Close my door when you go out, okay? Love you.
That they said good night. I heard it.
Okay, good night. Alrighty. So yeah, and did you mention third wave? I wasn't sure because of her.
Yeah, I mentioned I mentioned third wave real fast, but
sounds good. So does
second
that
wave
give
feminism?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Second wave feminism was about being empowered. Well, for lack of a better term, I know we're trying to keep this a family-friendly show, but sexually.
Yep.
And then third wave was about being empowered financially.
So leveling the playing field once again.
Yes.
Right. So with that being said, we have some good, we have some bad, we have some, all kinds of things. I think the biggest bad is the raw, unadulterated egalitarianism that seeks to level everything even beyond basically two outcomes instead of just a actual level playing field. It's actual level score. Right? If we're talking about a game, the score has to be leveled. And so that's kind of, a lot of people, like I said, they will point to Belle and they will say, oh, look at this great feminist being she's not fitting into the standard gender roles assigned to her by her society. And okay, but that's not a feminist thing necessarily. My grandmother was one of the most voracious readers you could possibly imagine. And the thing was, she had 9 kids to raise with a traveling husband who did, all kinds of traveling salesman stuff. And she had to educate herself, and she did, independently of anyone. and there were some people who loved her for it and some people who hated her for it, That's not a feminist ideal, That's not just a feminist thing at all. So, do we kind of touch on everything you were questioning about, Brendan?
Yeah.
Did we answer those questions?
Yes, easily. Well, covering it like that and just giving the brief summary really helps, because now, like, those are what the so you start with property, right? Then you go to free love, and then you go to I think there's a difference. I think to make a distinction between first and third, property is just opportunity, third is outcome.
Yes.
Right? So first way to feminism is equal opportunity. Third way to feminism is equal outcome. Okay, fine. To oversimplify, right?
Yes.
So where are you so where's that going to show up in Disney? With Ariel, it's opportunity.
Yes.
It's not equal opportunity, because she's asking for something that none of the other mermaids get.
Right.
But it's still opportunity.
Yes.
Belle, you can make an argument, is also opportunity, I think. Not necessarily outcome.
Yes.
But again, Belle is kind of weird because she's not as much of the feminist icon, I think.
Right. Yeah. She's very different. She's more independent. She's closer to what a libertarian would be today than any of the other ideas of general schools of thought we can think of, just because she is so she's so self-read as opposed to accepting society's goals for her.
Okay. So then, moving on through history, I think we should try to do a sort of brief overview of history and then sort of go back, because this is going to be a topic that's going to take us all show. I think the next logical thing would be, all right, we've already started the history. We did a brief break to discuss and define our terms. Now let's go back. Let's go back to the history and keep going from where we picked up or left off when we're dealing with the golden age of Disney and stuff. Because eventually what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to talk about, how does Disney put in this feminism, if they're even doing it at all?
Right.
And is how they're doing it positive or negative? Because I think that's where we have to go. And that's, again, something I'm not 100% sure about. I just, I look at results like long term from
since
what
we've
happened.
kind of covered since we kind of covered Pocahontas, or not, excuse me, Belle and Ariel, can we can move on to Pocahontas and kind of move through the Renaissance, because I think this is where, obviously, there was Miss Bianca slightly before the Renaissance, and we briefly touched on her. If we want to touch on more proto stuff, that's fine, but kind of work through the Renaissance, because how did the Renaissance change the way we kind of see women in and young girls in Disney animated films in particular, once we get past the Renaissance and into the Dark Ages? But mostly, like, how did the Renaissance change it? Because I think people aren't realizing they're still not realizing how huge, even though they have rose-tinted glasses and all the nostalgia and, oh, I love Disney, no one's really talking about how those films changed the industry very much, for whatever reason. TK, you want to hit on Pocahontas next?
Well, actually, Aladdin would come next.
Aladdin, yes. Let's go with Aladdin.
Yeah, Pocahontas came after. So, yeah, Pocahontas would have been the next one. So, in Aladdin, we have Jasmine, who is fighting against what is ostensibly... Well, she's essentially fighting for what the first wave feminists wanted, which was self-determination.
Right.
Being able to choose her own husband in the Islamic society meant self-determination. So, in that way, I feel like that was being a Christian. Of course, I'm going to view that as a more positive aspect.
Right.
Of the feminist movement is the self-determination against Islam's control over women.
Right. Yes. I mean, the Bible's pretty clear. Women should have every right to refuse a suitor. that's all throughout
exactly.
Scripture.
We have
yeah,
we have Ruth, the daughters of Zelophehad from Numbers 27, which is one of my favorite Bible stories. I mean, that's a weird one, I know.
I love it though.
But it actually does come into play here.
Mm-hmm.
Because if the Abrahamic covenant had covered Islam, Jasmine would have been able to inherit her father's throne without a man, because she had no brothers.
So can I
would have been able
soapbox
to
here for a second?
Oh, sure.
Soapbox. Anyway, so what we're gonna do? Yeah, I have a soundboard now. It's fun. Anyway, brief side tangent thing. In this form of quote unquote feminism, let's just call it self-determinism, as you were putting it. I'm not sold on that title, but we'll go with it for now. Tamar is the ultimate. Let's just be honest.
Oh, dude, that was a sucky situation.
Tamar was absolutely exonerated by God for her fault, for her wrongdoing in those situations, because she did the best, and Judah very clearly and prophetically, I might add, I believe he was acting as a prophet when he said this about her. He basically said, you have been far better than I in this situation. To kind of bring all that together. If you don't know, look up the story of Tamar. It is absolutely nuts. And I think that Islam, and generally speaking, a lot of the Puritan, and I say this puritanical, not actually connecting to the Puritans, but the way we use the word puritanical now. The puritanical West, really the Victorian West, that's what I should say. They really don't have a place for Tamar, but Christianity as a whole does. So that was my one little tangent here. And that has nothing to do with feminism whatsoever.
Well, actually it does.
Well, it does, but not what we know as feminism today.
Yes. Now, in the Aladdin TV series, they took that a step further and gave Jasmine the right to negotiate with other countries and basically be queen without that title.
Right.
Her basically the first lady of Agrabah. And the people are shown as very appreciative of her efforts to improve their lives. So she took the responsibility that she was given and used that responsibility wisely.
Right.
So she didn't just get what she wanted because, oh, this is a magical Disney movie. She got what she wanted, and she accepted the responsibilities that go with what she wanted.
Right, right. And there was no point with Jasmine where she is wanting anything selfishly, except maybe, you know, her right to determine her own destiny, blah, blah, blah. You can go with that, but that doesn't really flow into, even in the movie, what she thinks of her people. That's full actual compassion, and she wants things to be set right. Which is just good basic character development if you're going to be giving a character power. You know, it's the Faramir kind of a thing.
Yes.
Well, it's also it's not an envious self-determination, I don't think.
Yes, I would agree.
No.
Right? Because I think you can have a self-determination that is, they get to do this, why can't I?
Right.
As opposed to I want to have the ability to do this.
Or just, this is the right thing.
And
this is the right thing. Yeah.
This is the right thing to do. I want to have the ability to do this. It would be just for me to have this. And all these other people who have that, I don't begrudge them. Right?
No.
Yes.
So.
Because in certain episodes of the TV show, it's shown that Jasmine didn't want this for selfish reasons, as you said. She wanted to be respected because she wanted to help people. She wanted to have the power to change other people's fate as her fate was changed.
Right. And we see in the Suitors that she's rejected at the very least. The Prince Ahmed character, Corey Burton, does such a good job with that one. Every time I hear him, I'm like, that's Corey Burton. Just not one of his more subtle voices. It's just Corey Burton. And then we're moving from Jasmine to Pocahontas. This is where I think there's a big turn. And you may not think that. I don't know one way or another. But I think that all of Jasmine's reasoning is clear and logical. And then we get to Pocahontas, and all of her wants and longings are ethereal and don't make any sense.
Yes. Because in Native American culture, there wasn't really a culture of arranged marriage. In fact, in the Powhatan tribe, there was plural marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And they were basically trying to shove every, I hate using this term, so please forgive me, YouTube algorithm, magical Indian trope ever into this character. And
Rousseauian.
Trying to make it work.
Yes, Rousseauian, very much so. The noble savage, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Because they present, the Indian life as idealized and all this nonsense. And then they try to make a modern heroine out of Pocahontas, which, as we all know, historically doesn't work.
Not even close.
So we have Pocahontas espousing the Fern Gully, the last rainforest crap. They didn't know what they wanted with this. They didn't know what they wanted with this movie.
Not at all.
And I read an interview with the gentleman who played King Powhatan.
Mm-hmm.
And they were recording Pocahontas at the same time as Aladdin was wrapping up recording. And they were able to observe Robin Williams and some of the other guys doing their lines. And he expected to do something kind of goofy.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't expecting to do this whole very serious thing. So they weren't the voice actors, at least this one gentleman, was not presented with the reality of his situation.
Right.
And they didn't know what they wanted with this movie. It is abundantly clear from how disjointed everything is. And at the time I just learned about this, Disney was trying to set up a mini theme park in Virginia.
Huh.
It was going to be called
Okay.
Disney's America. They still own the property, but it's now just a parking lot. It's near Manassas Battlefield.
Wow.
So they were trying to do this, and I think that probably the documentary I watched didn't say this out loud, but I think that probably what they were trying to do was demonstrate their sincerity to the people of Virginia and the Powhatan tribe. And they failed.
That sounds about right.
Flippity flippity flop.
Oh, good gracious! We're gonna get in with the cool. We're gonna get in with the cool kids and have all that liberal cred. Look at how open-minded we are.
Mine's so open.
I said, yeah, no.
What'd you say, Brendan?
A mind is so open, it's a revolving door.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good one.
Oh boy, yeah. Oh my goodness. So, moving on. I mean, we could do so much more about Disney and wanting to be at the cool kids table by essentially feeding all the starving kids in Africa. I mean Virginia. But the basically, like, if you hear background stuff, kids are being kids.
Yes.
So we go from Pocahontas, and next, if I remember correctly, would be Mulan, correct?
You see, Pocahontas. It'd be Hunchback and Hercules, and then Mulan.
Yeah, we didn't count Hunchback in our thing. If you want to touch on Esmeralda, that's fine. But it's just she's not anywhere near the typical Disney princess formula. Oh yeah. Hunchback is Hunchback, and it's a mess, but it's a good mess. There's a lot of really good stuff that made it through that thing, and then there's the gargoyles. But anyway,
yeah, we'll go with Mulan.
So you said Hunchback, and what was the other one you mentioned briefly?
Hercules.
Hercules.
Hold on.
That's not a Disney princess movie.
No, it's not.
Hold on, real quick. Mm-hmm. In response to the gargoyles.
Soapbox.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. So, yeah, the gargoyles, man. Anyway, this one might be better, but
spank that horse, Brendan.
Anyway.
No, stop. But Hercules, I actually heard that Hercules is a gender-bent Disney princess movie, but
Okay, we do have kind of a I don't need no man kind of thing going on Hercules, so I guess you could kind of count that, but I don't think there's much we need to comment on that other than it turns out it's way more than that. It turns out Megara has one of the most tragic Disney backstories besides, like, Bambi.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
in the Hercules TV show, they reveal that the old boyfriend is actually Adonis, who went to school with Hercules. So
that's fun.
Yeah, that's terrible now that I think about it.
No comment.
Oh my goodness! What if they made her old boyfriend Sisyphus?
Oh no!
And he was cursed to do that forever. Anyway. Oh man. So okay, moving on to Mulan. Mulan is, I think, the quintessential and probably the peak of what people would call feminism in the 90s for Disney movies. Whether or not that's true, that's a whole other question. We talked about that a good bit in the Mulan episode, but TK, why don't you chime in mainly on your thoughts on this one, and we can kind of work around what you've got.
That works. Now, Mulan is an interesting case for me personally. Now, Mulan is one of my favorite Disney movies. And I ended up doing a lot of research into the legend of Mulan and other Chinese fairy tales of a similar genre. Because it happened so long ago that we're not certain if Mulan was real, but they treat her as if she was a real person in China proper.
Yes.
Now, The problem with Mulan is that they definitely Americanized the feminism.
Oh, for
because
real.
it's not because it's not like that in the original ballad or in any older versions of Mulan that I've seen from China.
Right.
Is that she goes to war to save her father, and she doesn't have a brother who's old enough. As in the Ballad of Mulan and in most Mulan films, Mulan has at least siblings. A sister and a brother who is younger than her.
Right.
Now, she has no elder brother, so she will buy a saddle and a horse and go into the army in place of father. A quote from the ballad. I memorized parts of it. So she does that. And then she doesn't seek for any honors. It just so happens that she's the best at what she does. Because she has to work twice as hard as any man, because she's a woman. And then when she comes back from the war, she just puts on her female clothes and goes back to being a dutiful daughter. She doesn't seek for a position in the army. She doesn't seek for any honor for herself. It just finds her, like, kind of like Ruth.
Right.
She doesn't seek for anything, but it finds her anyway. In Mulan, and especially Mulan 2, we have Mulan
2.
actively seeking to keep being in the man's world.
Mm-hmm.
She is actively seeking to continue to teach martial arts. She's actively seeking
to be as swift as a coursing river.
Exactly.
With all the
She's
strength
still
of a great
acting
typhoon.
like a man. Whereas in the Chinese versions, she just goes back to being a woman and having the woman's role in her society. The only difference becomes she is allowed the self-determination to pick her own spouse.
Right.
In the movie that Disney lifted basically the entire plot, including Shang's last name, from, Lady General Hua Mulan from 1956 or 57, I believe. She and Shang become engaged. And that is her choice, and her father allows her that choice, and it looks like, from the way that the father acts, that was always on the table. So she was going to be able to make her own self-determination, but that's the only benefit that she gains from being in the army. The only physical benefit that she gains from this. Because once she leaves the army, she just goes back to being a normal Chinese girl. So Mulan is an American feminist, not a feminist in the way that would have been considered at the time the ballad was written.
Right. Well, so what were you laughing at, Brendan? Just the ridiculousness of it?
Well, no, I just had a song pop in my head, and I realized that Barbie and Chinese have the same number of syllables. So you could sing, "I'm a Chinese girl in a Chinese world."
That's about accurate to what we got in Mulan.
This is yes, exactly. This is why I'm not allowed to go outside.
Oh goodness. But
But
yes.
yeah.
So we really only have a couple more after her. I mean, it depends on where you want to cut the Renaissance. Most people would talk about, but we definitely have Jane within the Renaissance, I would say, though there isn't a whole lot with Jane. If you have anything, then you can go ahead.
She ain't a princess.
I agree, but there's, and I don't think there's much feminism either. She's pretty damselly.
No. Yes. I mean, if you look at the Tarzan novels, you're going to see what that time frame's feminism looked like.
Right.
Is that self-determination, I'm a plucky American girl kind of thing.
Or British.
She's a lot
Disney
she's
world,
actually,
yeah.
she's actually a lot like Samantha from American Girl. If you're familiar with American Girl, I don't know.
Yeah.
I know you, Joshua, are. I don't know if Brendan had any sisters who were into that.
My sister has a PhD in theology, so no.
Now I want Lady Jane Grey as a historical American doll. Just saying. Anyway.
That is awesome.
Oh. But yeah,
she is pretty gamesly, but in the Tarzan novel, she's clever and figures out her own way out of the jam.
Mm-hmm.
So Tarzan does arrive to rescue her, but she's already like halfway out of the trap by the time he gets there.
Right. Yes. So, is there anyone else that you would add into this Renaissance? I jokingly say Cusco because everyone calls him a Disney princess. Anyway.
Cusco!
But go ahead.
Cusco's poison.
No, I don't think that there's any more that I would count in the Renaissance, because I cut the Renaissance about I cut that about Tarzan, because that's like right after Tarzan's when they started turning out all the sequels and crap.
I don't remember when Treasure Planet was, but that deserves it to be in the Renaissance. I'm sorry.
I would say definitely. Treasure Planet's a good ending to the Renaissance, honestly. That would also, I believe, encompass Lilo and Stitch. That's when we start getting a lot of the sci-fi films. Let me see here. So we've got Dinosaur, which I don't count as one of the canon films, but Disney does, so whatever.
Nope.
Emperor's New Groove, Atlantis: The Lost Empire, Lilo and Stitch, and then Treasure Planet. Yeah, I think once we go from Treasure Planet to Brother Bear is when we enter the Dark Age.
Yeah, definitely.
So I guess technically you could talk Nani or Captain What's-Her-Face. Captain Catface. What's her name?
Amelia.
Treasure Planet. Brendan, come on, it's your movie.
Yeah, that's... Yeah, sorry. She's Captain.
Or you could technically talk about any of the females in Atlantis, but none of them are like fleshed out enough to where feminism even matters. They're just all attitude.
No.
So,
yeah.
Well, hold on though. Actually, but that's a nice segue for the last 10 minutes of our show. Or however long we've got.
I really wanted to get to how this affected further out, like how this changed the way Disney looks at feminism, and how they put it in their films now versus then. But if you had a transition to something else too, we can go a little longer if TK's good. Either way, but yeah. So, what did you have? You can do it? Okay.
Yeah, I can go a little longer.
Okay.
Well, the thing that I have is that, so how does so we've established what feminism is. We've kind of touched on it, but we haven't really talked about how is the feminism shown in the movie. What are the things that the characters want equal opportunity, because in that era of feminism, we're talking first wave or the Disney stories for kids, they are still impacted by first wave feminism specifically because Disney hadn't gone off the deep end and thought, let's teach kids sexual things yet. But so they're stuck with first wave, which means they're stuck with opportunity. I say stuck with. They embrace the idea of the concept of equal opportunity. So how, though, does that come across in the film? The most obvious answer is story, but I think the second one is not just story, but how do they talk? And how do they act? What are their lines? And specifically, how do they talk to characters? Which I get is plot in a way, but Jane in Tarzan, she's kind of a damsel, but I'm pretty sure she sticks it to Clayton verbally multiple times.
Yes.
And Clayton just kind of grumbles and says behind her back, I'm going to kill those gorillas if it's the last thing I do.
Because he's Clayton. Anyway.
because he's Clayton and he has the depth of a toadstool. But
he has a great death. It makes up for it. But I see what you're saying. I think it did change the way that they write females entirely. But I think the biggest sad thing from an aesthetic point of view is except for maybe Jane's accent. And then I'm trying to think further into all the further Disney princess movies. That could be a reason why Tiana, quote unquote, failed, because it wasn't really a box office failure. It just wasn't as much as they wanted. Tiana talks like a first wave Disney princess. She talks like Cinderella and Aurora, but with, Southern accent and some Southernisms thrown in there. She isn't written like a Renaissance or post-Renaissance, I would say second Renaissance, but that's a whole other thing, like Disney princess. She doesn't talk like Anna from Frozen, like, at all.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the reasons Tiana sticks out, and we'll get to that with Princess and the Frog. But yeah, I think that's one of the big impacts. This kind of dovetails well with what you were wanting to look at and what I'm wanting to look at. I think the Renaissance ultimately changed the way females talk, because except for things like Tiana's accent and Jane's accent, giving a Disney princess an accent, I guess you could technically count Merida, but that's Pixar, that's the other studio, isn't a thing. It essentially alienates the expectations of the audience now to give a Disney princess any sort of accent. It almost immediately makes them more medieval or frumpy. You know what I mean? Like,
what do you mean by accent? Do you mean literal? I mean literal
accent. I mean literal accent. I also mean just, what's the term? Accent or dialect. A dialectical difference. Because most of the characters most of the characters now, I think the formula is most formulaic with Anna from Frozen. You can see it in a lot of the others, but I think they really hit their stride with Anna from Frozen. It is American teenager girl to a T. There's goofy, anxious humor thrown in, and almost all the people, and the goofy, anxious humor comes from all the people around her are of the time period. They're of the world. They fit in the world, even if they're a cartoonized version of that. And they're like, oh, look at this girl. She doesn't fit in. Wacky, wacky, just like you, American girl. Self-insert, self-insert. Like, that's, I think, what we got out of Disney's feminism experiment in the Renaissance.
Well, it's also, though, but you also have, oh my gosh, what's her name? The begins with an A. The mechanic girl from Atlantis. Audrey.
Yeah.
She is definitely not a princess. So how do you distinguish a female character? Give him an accent.
Yes. Yeah.
And also a quirky sort of, but Audrey also is another form of, here we go. That's the third way feminism is expressed.
Yeah.
Give the girl a guy's job and have her be insanely good at it. Treasure Planet
and annoyingly defensive about it at the same time.
Not necessarily. It could be.
She was tasteful. She was tasteful, but I'm saying that's what they did a lot of the time, is make them annoyingly defensive about it. But go ahead.
Well, the captain in Treasure Planet has a certain amount of that, but not as much. It's more of a I'm in charge.
Nearly as much.
Deal with it.
Exactly. Yes.
But she's the captain, and she's a darn good captain, despite the fact that half her crew are pirates who are secret cell, like what's the word for when you have when they say a code phrase and the spies wake up? Sleeper cell. There we go. Yeah. Despite the fact that the pirates are sleeper cells inside, waiting for Jim to say the magic words and have them go boom. But So I think you've got like, yes, you have Disney Renaissance of feminism changing both how they talk, but it's also changing what can they do, right? Now, if Disney hadn't done that, would women still get to where they are? Absolutely. Disney wasn't the only one doing this.
Right. Christianity was doing this.
Well, that, but also that too. But also, and this is not something I can speak to because I am not a woman. So I guess the question I have to ask then, I have to ask this to TK. TK, did you walk away from the Disney princesses thinking I can do that?
It depended on the character.
Fair enough.
My favorite was Jasmine.
Mm-hmm.
Jasmine was and still is my absolute favorite Disney princess.
Okay.
Because at first when I was younger, I was like, oh, she's the action girl. She's the action princess. She can do what she wants. Blah, blah, blah. But as I got older, I realized it was her compassion and her ability to negotiate with other people who are different from her that was what I admired. It wasn't, I'm going to punch this 40 thief guy. I'm going to use this spear, all that jazz, because she does that. But
this is one of the reasons I really love Moana. I don't want to get too off topic.
Mm-hmm.
But Moana does such an amazing job of balancing tradition and new ideas and all the other sorts of stuff that it's trying to do. It's just so good. And Maui's just punches way through everything. And this was the Disney's step back very briefly in the time period toward more of a traditional thing. Yes, she's female. Yes, she's being groomed to be chief because she's the offspring, blah, blah, blah. That's not uncommon in like Maori culture. It's a little weird in Hawaiian, if I remember correctly, but like they're Polynesian in a general sense. They're kind of proto-Polynesian, and so it works. But the fact that she is using healing and compassion to fix a generational curse is awesome. And then they try and do it again and again with things like Encanto, and it just feels weird.
It just
they try to
gets weird.
Formalize it. Yeah, they just try to formalize it instead of letting it flow from the characters,
Well, also Tangled.
Yeah.
Tangled, in my opinion, is so good.
Yeah, it's
like it's probably the best. And it's you have yes, we can argue that Flynn isn't the stereotypical hero, but of course he's not. He's a thief, right? He's not a knight in shining armor. That's not him not being a man. That's him not being a hero. There's a difference, right?
Right.
Yes.
So anyway,
well, and with touching Rapunzel before we rock and roll out of here, she has the same sort of thing as Belle, but they don't draw as much attention to it. Yet at this point, we also have, and to be perfectly fair, the feminism wasn't the only thing that caused the self-insert "look at me, I'm a wacky American teenager in a fantasy world" thing. That honestly, I think more so came from Hilary Duff, particularly.
Yeah.
Proto Hilary Duff herself, Mandy Moore. But yeah, that was a whole thing. But TK, I want to give you final words on whatever you want to say, and then on the Disney topics, and then you can plug and we can wrap this thing up. So go right ahead.
Alrighty. I'm going to answer Brendan's question in that no, I did not believe I could do this thing that was in this movie. Because, number one, my parents taught me that cartoons are not reality. Number two
what a concept.
Number two is that I am not rich. I'm not a princess. I can't do something like that. I think that I would hope if I were given the opportunity, like, say, Princess Di was, I would do what she did. You know, use my power for the good of other people. And, you know, build playgrounds and stuff like that. But I did not walk away from a Disney movie saying, wow, I can do this. I walked away from a Disney movie like, oh, what a great story. I love this and I want all the merch. You know, when I was a child. But my thought on the whole princess thing was, it's not who they are, it's what you do. And going to a completely different topic, this just floated through my brain, it's what you do that makes a hero. One of the lines that came out of
That's
a
very right.
movie.
Punch the Joker in the face.
That came from Bionicle Mask of Light.
That too.
But it's a very true statement. It's what you do that makes a hero. It's what you do that makes a princess. So you can, if I were to have a daughter, I would say, yes, you can act like a princess if you do these things, not, you know, expect all the sparkly stuff and all that frankly frippery that goes with being a princess. A princess is compassionate, brave, uses her powers for good, all that stuff. What I would tell my daughter if I had the... Actually, I watched Sailor Moon Crystal and she wasn't that bad. I expected a lot worse.
But to be serious, you say do not confuse the trappings with the substance.
Yes.
The gender flip of that would be muscles don't make the man? ?
Yes.
Yeah. Muscles don't make the man, or armor doesn't make the man.
Sparkle doesn't make the princess. I want that on a t-shirt. All right, TK, do you have stuff to plug? You got a book. We mentioned that at the beginning. Brendan, can you hold that up again? Since you have it there.
I can. It's right here. Behold. Yes. The shiny book of shininess.
Plug away while he holds.
Okay. My novel is Chronicle of the Hidden People, Volume 1, The Book of the White Raven. It is on Amazon for print, paperback print. Excuse me, I do not have a hardcover yet. And Kindle Unlimited. And Kindle. I get paid if you use Kindle. And not Kindle Unlimited. But that is inspired by Disney movies, golden age of fantasy films like Labyrinth, Dark Crystal, Beauty and the Beast 1987, the TV show, not the movie, and other usually 1980s stuff. So if you're interested in 1980s like pulpy stuff, give it a look.
Alrighty then. Well, everybody, be your family's bard. Do not turn to the right or to the left, and the Lord will be with you wherever you go. We'll see you next time in the trenches on Poets at War.
For more conversations like this with our 3 intrepid leaders, go to joshuadavidling.com and check out more of Poets at War.
God of songs said